8:42 p.m., March 27, 1999. 20,000 feet above Serbian farmland, Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko's world exploded into flame. The impossible had just happened. An American F-117 Nighthawk, the most advanced stealth aircraft ever built, invisible to radar, untouchable by enemy fire, was tumbling through the darkness over Yugoslavia, its left wing sheared away by a Soviet-era missile that shouldn't have been able to see it, much less destroy it. In those terrifying seconds, as Zelko reached for his ejection handles, one thought must have raced through his mind. How did they find me? 20 miles away, in a command van that reeked of cigarette smoke and nervous sweat, Serbian Colonel Zoltán Dani allowed himself the smallest of smiles. After 4 nights of patient hunting, his 3-man crew had just accomplished what NATO said couldn't be done. They had killed the invisible dragon. But this wasn't luck. This wasn't an accident. This was the culmination of weeks of careful observation, innovative thinking, and a refusal to accept that American technology was invincible. While NATO flew their missions with clockwork predictability, Dani had been taking notes. And on this cloudy spring night, all that patience was about to shake the very foundations of American air superiority doctrine. The story of how a Hungarian baker's son, commanding a missile battery, older than some of his soldiers, managed to shoot down a $2 billion symbol of American military dominance isn't just about one lucky shot. It's about what happens when David studies Goliath's every move, when innovation meets arrogance, and when the predator becomes the prey. If you're fascinated by military history stories where the underdog outsmarts the giant, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Old Breed channel. We bring you the most compelling military narratives from history, told with the detail and authenticity they deserve. 4 days earlier, on March 24th, NATO had launched Operation Allied Force, a massive bombing campaign designed to force Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic to withdraw his forces from Kosovo. The alliance brought overwhelming firepower, nearly 1,000 aircraft from 13 nations, cruise missiles, and the crown jewel of American air power, the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter. The Nighthawk was supposed to be untouchable. Its angular, faceted design scattered radar waves in every direction except back to the receiver. Its skin was coated with radar-absorbent materials that turned electromagnetic energy into heat. In the Gulf War 8 years earlier, F-117s had flown over 1,400 combat sorties without a single loss. Iraqi radar operators hadn't even known they were there until the bombs started falling. But Colonel Zoltán Dani wasn't an Iraqi conscript. He was a career air defense officer who had spent 20 years studying his craft, and more importantly, studying his enemy. Dani commanded the 3rd Battalion of the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade, equipped with the S-125 Neva, known to NATO as the SA-3 Goa. The system was ancient by military standards, first deployed in 1961. Its vacuum tube technology belonged in a museum. NATO planners had dismissed it as obsolete, a relic that posed no threat to modern aircraft, let alone stealth fighters. This dismissal would prove to be a fatal mistake. Dani knew his equipment was old, but he also knew something else. Physics doesn't change. The principles that made radar work in 1961 still applied in 1999. The question wasn't whether his radar could see stealth aircraft. The question was how to make it see them. For weeks before the bombing started, Dani and his team had been preparing. They studied everything they could find about stealth technology. They analyzed NATO flight patterns over Bosnia during the previous conflict. They modified their equipment, tweaking frequencies and adjusting wavelengths. Most importantly, they developed tactics that no one at NATO had anticipated. The SA-3 system typically operated at frequencies between 2 and 3 gigahertz, but Dani's team discovered something crucial. Stealth aircraft were optimized to defeat radars operating at higher frequencies, the kind used by most modern air defense systems. By modifying their equipment to operate at lower frequencies, around the longer wavelengths, they could potentially detect the radar signature that the F-117's designers thought they had eliminated. It was like switching from a flashlight to a floodlight. The resolution was worse, but the coverage was better. But detection was only half the problem. The F-117 flew at night, changed its routes regularly, and spent minimal time over any given area. To shoot one down, Dani would need to know exactly where to look and exactly when to look there. This is where NATO's confidence became their weakness. By the fourth night of the bombing campaign, patterns had emerged. The strike packages followed similar ingress routes. The timing was predictable. Strikes typically began around 8 p.m. local time. The F-117s, operating from Aviano Air Base in Italy, had to fly roughly the same distance to reach their targets in Belgrade. Physics and fuel consumption created constraints that no amount of stealth technology could overcome. Dani positioned his battery near the village of Simonovci, about 20 miles west of Belgrade. It was perfect terrain, flat farmland that gave his radars clear sight lines, multiple escape routes for his vehicles, and close enough to the capital to intercept aircraft heading for high-value targets. But he didn't just set up and wait. Every few hours, his entire battery would pack up and move. 3 missile launchers, a radar van, a command vehicle. Everything mobile, everything hidden. They operated for no more than 20 seconds at a time, just long enough to take a snapshot of the sky before shutting down and relocating. NATO's anti-radiation missiles, designed to home in on radar emissions, needed a continuous signal to lock on. 20 seconds wasn't enough. On the evening of March 27th, Dani's network of spotters reported the takeoff of F-117s from Aviano. The weather was perfect for the Serbs. Low clouds at about 15,000 feet would force the American aircraft to fly predictable paths to maintain visual contact with their targets. At 8:15 p.m., Dani ordered his radar operators to begin their hunting sequence. 20 seconds on, then off. Move, wait, listen. 20 seconds on, then off. Nothing. 8:25 p.m. 20 seconds on. A faint return, almost invisible among the background clutter. Something was out there, moving at 550 miles per hour, bearing 270 degrees. Off. Move. Wait. 8:35 p.m. 20 seconds on. The return was stronger now. Range, 40 miles and closing. The computer calculated the intercept point, the invisible lines of physics and probability converging on a single point in space and time. But Dani didn't fire. Not yet. He knew the F-117's most vulnerable moment wasn't when it was cruising. It was when it opened its bomb bay doors. For those few crucial seconds, the aircraft's perfect stealth profile was compromised. The open bay created a radar cavity, a corner reflector that would bounce electromagnetic energy straight back to its source. It was like a ghost suddenly becoming solid. 8:40 p.m. The track was steady now, heading straight for Belgrade. Dani's radar operator, Sergeant First Class Dragan Matic, kept his screen focused on that faint blip. In 60 seconds, maybe 90, it would be over the target. The bomb bay doors would open. "Prepare to engage," Dani ordered. In the launcher vehicles, crews armed their missiles. The SA-3 used a two-stage design, a solid fuel booster that burned for 3 seconds, then a liquid fuel sustainer that could push the missile out to 15 miles. Each missile weighed 1,400 pounds and carried a 130-pound warhead surrounded by 4,500 metal fragments. It didn't need a direct hit. Within 50 feet would be enough. 8:41 p.m. The track began to slow slightly, the telltale sign of an aircraft preparing for the weapon release. "Target acquired," Madic reported. "Locked on." Inside his command van, Dani made the calculation. Distance, 23 miles. Altitude, 20,000 feet. Speed, 480 miles per hour. The missile would need 22 seconds to reach the intercept point. The bomb bay would be open for approximately 8 seconds. The margin for error was essentially 0. "Launch," Dani commanded. 2 missiles erupted from their launchers, the night sky lighting up with orange flame. The solid boosters burned brilliantly for 3 seconds. Then the liquid sustainers took over, propelling the missiles through the cloud layer at 3 times the speed of sound. In the cockpit of Vega 3-1, Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko was focused on his target, a military communications building in downtown Belgrade. His aircraft was on autopilot, flying straight and level. The bomb bay doors were open. In 3 seconds, the 2,000-pound GPS-guided bomb would release, the doors would close, and he'd be heading home. That's when his threat warning receiver exploded with alarms. The F-117 had no radar. It relied entirely on passive sensors to detect threats. Suddenly, those sensors were screaming that fire control radar had locked onto his aircraft. This was impossible. The Nighthawk was invisible. The warnings had to be false. But Zelko was too experienced to ignore his instruments. He immediately initiated defensive maneuvers, banking hard to the left, trying to break the radar lock. It was too late. The first SA-3 missile passed close enough that Zelko could see its exhaust plume through his cockpit window. For a split second, he thought he'd escaped. Then the second missile detonated. The warhead exploded about 6 feet from the aircraft's left wing, sending 4,500 metal fragments slicing through the night air. The wing disintegrated instantly. Hydraulic lines severed. Flight controls failed. The F-117, an aircraft that was aerodynamically unstable even under perfect conditions, began an uncontrollable tumble. Zelko reached down between his legs, grabbed the yellow and black striped ejection handles, and pulled. The canopy exploded away. A second later, the Ace's 2 ejection seat fired, rocketing Zelko out of the dying aircraft at 14 Gs of acceleration. The sudden deceleration from 400 miles per hour to 0 should have killed him. But the seat's rocket motor and drogue chutes worked perfectly, and within seconds, Zelko was descending under his main parachute through the Serbian night. Below him, his F-117, tail number 820806, the same aircraft that had dropped the first bombs on Baghdad in 1991, spiraled toward the farmland below. In Dani's command van, the radar screen showed the target disappearing, breaking into multiple pieces. Cheers erupted from the crew. They had done it. They had shot down an American stealth fighter. But Dani wasn't celebrating. He immediately ordered his unit to pack up and move. In minutes, maybe less, American aircraft would be swarming the area, looking for revenge. The same mobility that had allowed him to survive would now save his battalion from retaliation. As his vehicles disappeared into the night, farmers from the nearby village of Bujanovci were already converging on the crash site. The wreckage was spread over several hundred yards of field. Twisted metal, composite materials, and classified components that would soon be on their way to Russian and Chinese intelligence services. Dale Zelko landed in a plowed field about 2 miles from the wreckage. He could hear dogs barking in the distance and see vehicles approaching. Following his survival training, he immediately activated his rescue beacon and found cover in a drainage ditch. For the next 8 hours, he would evade Serbian search parties, while American combat search and rescue teams fought their way through enemy territory to reach him. The rescue itself was a miracle of coordination and courage. 2 A-10 Thunderbolts, 2 HH-60 Pavehawk helicopters, and multiple F-16 fighters created a protective bubble around Zelko's position. Serbian forces fired over 8,000 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition and launched at least 2 more surface-to-air missiles trying to stop the rescue. But at 4:46 a.m., after what Zelko would later describe as the longest night of his life, an American helicopter pulled him to safety. The strategic implications of that night were immediate and profound. Within hours, the Pentagon was forced to admit that its premier stealth aircraft had been shot down. The carefully cultivated myth of invisibility was shattered. Every potential adversary in the world suddenly knew that stealth didn't mean invulnerable. The technical investigation revealed uncomfortable truths. The F-117 had been flying the same ingress routes for 4 consecutive nights. The pilots had become predictable, even complacent. The aircraft's stealth characteristics, while still remarkable, had known vulnerabilities that a clever enemy could exploit. Most damaging of all, pieces of the crashed fighter, including samples of its radar-absorbent coating and fragments of its computer systems, were quickly spirited away to Moscow and Beijing. 20 years of American technological advantage was compromised in a single night. But perhaps the most important lesson wasn't technical. It was tactical. Dani had proven that innovation could overcome technological superiority. By understanding his enemy's patterns, exploiting their overconfidence, and maximizing his equipment's strengths rather than lamenting its weaknesses, he had achieved what everyone said was impossible. The parallels to modern warfare are impossible to ignore. Today, as hypersonic missiles challenge carrier strike groups and drones swarm traditional aircraft, we're seeing the same lesson played out again and again. There's no such thing as an invincible weapon. After the war, Zoltán Dani and Dale Zelko would eventually meet and, remarkably, become friends. They discovered they had more in common than what separated them. Both were professional military officers, both were family men, and both had been doing their duty on that fateful night in March. Dani retired from the Serbian military as a colonel, occasionally giving lectures about air defense tactics. He runs a bakery now, the family business he grew up in. But military historians and air defense specialists still study his tactics, looking for lessons that might apply to detecting modern stealth aircraft like the F-22 and F-35. Zelko continued his Air Force career, retiring as a colonel after flying multiple aircraft types and serving in various command positions. He still speaks occasionally about that night over Serbia, always emphasizing the professionalism of the Serbian Air Defense Forces and the importance of never underestimating your enemy. The wreckage of F-117 serial number 820806 is now displayed in the Museum of Aviation in Belgrade. Tourists can walk right up to it, touch the twisted metal, and see the actual aircraft that changed military history. It's a humbling reminder that in warfare, technology is just one factor among many. The United States Air Force learned from the loss. Stealth tactics were revised, flight patterns became less predictable. The integration of electronic warfare and stealth technology was improved. The F-117 would fly for another 9 years after the Serbian incident, finally retiring in 2008 without suffering another combat loss. But the psychological impact could never be fully repaired. Every stealth pilot who flew after March 27th, 1999, knew they weren't invisible. Somewhere below, there might be another Zoltán Dani, watching, learning, waiting for that moment of vulnerability. The technical details of how Dani modified his radar remain partially classified to this day. What we do know is that he experimented with longer wavelengths, possibly in the VHF band, which are less affected by radar-absorbent materials. He also may have used bistatic radar techniques, where the transmitter and receiver are in different locations, making it harder for stealth shaping to deflect the signal away. But the real genius wasn't in any single technique. It was in the combination. Low-frequency radar for detection, visual observers for confirmation, signals intelligence to predict arrival times, and most importantly, the discipline to only emit for seconds at a time. It was a system designed by someone who understood that survival came first, killing second. The missile battery that shot down Vega 3-1 never lost a single vehicle or soldier during the entire 78-day bombing campaign. They would damage 2 more NATO aircraft, an F-16 and another F-117 that managed to limp home, but never achieved another kill. NATO had learned its lesson. The element of surprise was gone. In the broader context of Operation Allied Force, the loss of the F-117 was statistically insignificant. NATO flew over 38,000 sorties during the campaign, losing only 2 aircraft to enemy fire. The bombing eventually achieved its political objectives, forcing Serbian forces to withdraw from Kosovo. But statistics don't capture the psychological impact. For the first time since Vietnam, an American aircraft had been shot down by a surface-to-air missile. And not just any aircraft, the crown jewel of American air power, the invisible fighter that was supposed to own the night sky. The incident also highlighted a recurring theme in military history: the danger of fighting the last war. The U.S. Air Force had become so dominant in the Gulf War that it had perhaps forgotten that enemies learn, adapt, and innovate. The Serbs weren't the Iraqis. They had studied American tactics, identified weaknesses, and developed countermeasures. This same overconfidence would surface again years later in Iraq and Afghanistan, where insurgents with improvised explosive devices would challenge the might of the American military. Technology provides advantage, but it doesn't guarantee victory. Wars are still won by people. Their creativity, determination, and willingness to find new solutions to old problems. The scientific principles that Dani exploited haven't gone away. Modern stealth aircraft like the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning are far more advanced than the F-117, with better shaping, better materials, and active electronic countermeasures. But they still operate on the same basic principle: reducing, not eliminating, radar cross-section. And potential adversaries have been taking notes. Russia's S-400 and S-500 air defense systems specifically advertise their ability to detect stealth aircraft using multiple radar frequencies and networked sensors. China has developed similar capabilities. The age of invisibility that began with the F-117 has evolved into an ongoing competition between stealth and counter-stealth technologies. The human factor remains paramount. Dani succeeded not because he had better technology, but because he understood his technology better than his enemies understood theirs. He knew that his ancient SA-3 system, with all its limitations, still had capabilities that hadn't been fully explored. Through experimentation, patience, and tactical innovation, he found those capabilities and exploited them. There's also a lesson about humility. The F-117 pilots flying over Serbia were among the best in the world, flying the most advanced aircraft ever built. But they had become predictable. They had begun to believe their own propaganda about being invisible. That complacency created the vulnerability that Dani exploited. In interviews years later, Dale Zelko would acknowledge this. He admits that the stealth community had become somewhat overconfident. They had flown so many successful missions without being detected that they'd stopped thinking like they could be shot down. It took a Serbian colonel with obsolete equipment to remind them that in war, you're never truly safe. The shootdown also demonstrated the importance of integrated air defense. Dani didn't work alone. He had spotters reporting aircraft movements, signals intelligence providing warning of incoming strikes, and higher headquarters coordinating the overall defense. The SA-3 battery was just one part of a larger system, and that system, not any single component, made the kill possible. Modern military planners study the incident for exactly this reason. In an age of network-centric warfare, where sensors, shooters, and command systems are all connected, the lessons from that night over Serbia are more relevant than ever. A single node in the network, even an obsolete one, can achieve extraordinary results if properly integrated and commanded. The financial implications were staggering. Each F-117 cost approximately $42 million to build in 1980s dollars, over $100 million in today's money. The program's total cost, including development, was over $6 billion for 59 aircraft. To lose one to a missile system that cost perhaps $100,000 was a harsh reminder about the economics of warfare. But beyond the money was the loss of prestige. The F-117 had been a symbol of American technological dominance, proof that the United States could develop weapons systems so advanced that no other nation could match them. Its loss to a Serbian missile battery using Soviet technology from the Kennedy administration was deeply embarrassing. The propaganda value for Serbia was enormous. Within hours of the shootdown, Serbian television was broadcasting images of the wreckage. Slobodan Milosevic personally visited the crash site. The twisted remains of the F-117 became a symbol of resistance, proof that Serbia could stand up to NATO's might. Even today, over 2 decades later, the incident remains a source of national pride in Serbia. The museum display in Belgrade draws thousands of visitors annually. Zoltán Dani is regarded as a national hero, the David who slew Goliath with a sling from the Cold War era. For military historians, the engagement represents a perfect case study in asymmetric warfare. It shows how a weaker opponent can defeat a stronger one through superior tactics, better intelligence, and the element of surprise. It's required reading in air defense schools around the world, a timeless lesson about the importance of thinking creatively and never underestimating your enemy. The technical innovations that Dani pioneered have influenced air defense development globally. The use of long-wavelength radar to detect stealth aircraft is now standard practice. The emphasis on mobility and emission control, shooting and scooting, has been adopted by air defense forces worldwide. The integration of multiple sensors and human intelligence to create a comprehensive air picture is now doctrine, not innovation. For the United States Air Force, the loss led to significant changes. The retirement of the F-117 in 2008 was partly due to the realization that its first-generation stealth technology was no longer sufficient. The newer F-22 and F-35 incorporate lessons learned from the Serbian incident with better stealth characteristics, improved situational awareness, and more flexible tactics. The human story adds another dimension to this military tale. Dale Zelko's 8 hours on the ground in enemy territory, evading capture while rescue forces fought to reach him, is a testament to the courage and training of American pilots. The fact that he was successfully rescued despite intense Serbian efforts to capture or kill him showed that even in failure, American forces could project power and protect their own. Zoltán Dani's story is equally compelling. A professional soldier who did his duty with skill and determination, he never expressed hatred for his enemies or gloried in violence. His post-war friendship with Zelko shows that warriors can respect each other even across the divide of conflict. His transition from colonel to baker, from shooting down aircraft to making bread, is a reminder that soldiers are people first, warriors second. The legacy of March 27, 1999, extends far beyond the technical and tactical lessons. It's a reminder that warfare is ultimately a human endeavor where courage, creativity, and determination matter as much as technology. It's a caution against hubris, a warning that no advantage is permanent and no victory is assured. As we look at modern conflicts where artificial intelligence, hypersonic weapons, and cyber warfare are changing the nature of combat, the lesson from that night over Serbia remains relevant. Technology shapes warfare, but doesn't define it. The human element, the colonel studying his enemy's patterns, the pilot maintaining his composure under fire, the rescue crews risking everything to save a comrade, that's what determines outcomes. The shootdown of Vega 3-1 was a single engagement in a larger war, one missile battery against one aircraft on one night. But sometimes, single moments can change everything. Sometimes, one person with the right idea at the right time can challenge an entire doctrine, upset a balance of power, and remind the world that in warfare, nothing is certain. If this story reminded you that innovation and determination can overcome any technological advantage, please share it with someone who appreciates military history. Subscribe to the Old Breed channel for more incredible stories of courage, tactics, and the human element in warfare. And let us know in the comments, did you know about this extraordinary David versus Goliath encounter before watching? What other underdog military victories should we cover next? The night when Zoltán Dani shot down the impossible remains one of the most important lessons in modern military history. Not because it changed the outcome of the war, it didn't. Not because it stopped the bombing, it couldn't. But because it proved that with enough patience, intelligence, and courage, even the invisible can be made visible. Even the untouchable can be brought down. And in warfare, that possibility, that perpetual uncertainty, is perhaps the only constant that never changes.